highly innovative nonprofit and for-profit social ventures. Mr. Carius is the Senior Sustainability Analyst, and he works with Grants for Zurich and on projects for building capacity in emerging markets and sustainable investment in a healthy world. Please welcome Amber Nystrom and Paula Carius.
Hi. So, Emily and John, thanks for having us here. I think this is the third time I've been in your class, and I'm always really excited and honored to be here. It's an unbelievable thing to me that you actually have my courses on the social entrepreneurs, people that are interested in the field, and that is really exciting to me. I was thinking about tonight's conversation, and I really do want to keep it that way. This is a conversation. So I'm not going to do a formal presentation, neither is Oliver. We're not going to show any slides or graphs. We're going to have a conversation first where I'll tell you a little bit about my personal background and about the organization that I founded and run, and a little bit about this space that we're calling social entrepreneurism, which is really the intersection between business and innovation. Sustainable, social, and economic innovation. A little bit about where we think this space is going. So we'll keep it very contextual, keep it very personal, because that's what this is about. In my mind, the single most important thing about social entrepreneurism, social enterprise, all these terms that we're using, really simply, this is about practicing business as the person you want to be. And we're finally having opportunities where you don't have to choose. This is about combining. So I'll spend a few minutes on that, sketch out our future landscape. Oliver will talk a little bit about his background. We are collaborators between our organizations. So we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing there, and then really have a Q&A between us. And not scripted. I said to him, you challenged me in some things. We've just come from a day-long group meeting with a media network and Google and a bunch in the field talking about this. So we'll keep this dynamic, and then we'll open it up and we'll have a conversation with you. So, I was recently in Honduras a week ago, just got back, and I had a really interesting conversation with someone named Eric Rentmeyer. I don't know how many of you know the Rentmeyer family in Europe. This is a family that had been in business for 6 generations, very successful. They're the Rockefellers in Europe. And I've done a presentation there at the University of Zamorano with your counterparts. They're down in Honduras. These are MBA and postgraduate, undergraduate students that are looking out at the world and saying, how is it that we grow businesses here in Honduras that, yes, generate financial returns, but also invest in the people and sustainable development that will enable them to use business to create a real future for themselves and for their kids. And Eric came up to me afterwards and said, can I give you a little bit of feedback about your presentation? And he said that one of the things that he thought was most important is to make sure that we keep it really real. And we had, 2 or 3 hour conversations. And one of the things that I think is a really good news for all of you, kind of the good news and the bad news, actually. That is that there is no formula for being a social entrepreneur. There is not a standard person. You're going to get tastes here. But the essence of being a social entrepreneur, from my perspective, is about doing. And it is absolutely about failure. It is about experimentation. It is about bringing together different component parts, some from economics, some from business, some from policy, and creating new ways to practice business. You're routinely lucky in that you have a class where this is being practiced in a thin way, right? Entrepreneurship in practice. The person leading this class is one of the entrepreneurs in Social Fusion who has absolutely come up with an innovative business design, uses some existing technology, uses some existing best practices in business, and applies it in a completely different way to reach populations that previously have not been served. If you don't remember anything else when you walk out of here tonight, I hope you do remember that. The good news is for all of you, right, that you get to make a whole lot of mistakes, and not only that, it's essential. And that was Eric's message, right? You run up against that wall, and the difference is that a real entrepreneur, well, they never give up. And the social entrepreneur would argue even beyond that, because they're driven by that business design, but they're also driven by an absolutely fundamental need to transform the world through business. So, my background. My background is split between international development, some work in policy, as an educator, otherwise known as a lobbyist for a good cause. That's where I started out. And I was interested in changing the world from an undergraduate level. I thought to do with policy and economics, so I went into politics, became a lobbyist for a good cause with the Population Institute, and stumbled into a program called the Future Leaders of the World program, which simply put is slave labor, except that you get to take on a lot of responsibilities. This was really exciting when we raised what seemed like a big amount of money to implement some changes in economic development, then that money was decimated. So then got an opportunity to work on a ground level, and there's just one little story that I want to offer because it defines what social fusion is today. And that is, I've gone from DC, working with extraordinary people, from the U.S. Senate, to NDP, to an FDA, bringing together multi-partisan platforms to put together money and resources for international development. By the time I went down that door, I thought, I'm in my early 20s, I think I was pretty excited that I had a whole lot to offer, right? Well, I went to a little town called Tena, which is a little bitty town outside Ecuador. It's quite a small country. At the capital, Quito, little town called Tena near the jungle, and met a woman named Rosalind, who set me straight. She laughed at me. First moment I met her. I told her about these grand plans, what we're going to do, and implement some stuff. And she said, the problems that you think are the problems here aren't. The solutions that you have in mind won't work. And even if you had any clue what you were talking about, you wouldn't be able to do anything here because you have no idea what's going on here on the ground. Whew. That was my welcome. Fortunately, she let me learn from her. And everything that I am doing, the best social entrepreneurs I have great honor to work with now, doing, defined by what she had to say. I didn't realize this until recently. What she taught me was that, lo and behold, she had a really good idea of the problem. Right? Shockingly enough, she's living there in the midst of these problems through her whole life. Not only that, she had a pretty good idea of some quite innovative solutions. Maybe not all of them, but some really good solutions. What didn't she have? She didn't have access to the mentor, to a role model. You could say, this is what it would look like for me to grow up some of these ideas that I have, in business, talk to people around me. You know, if you haven't seen a color ever before, how can you imagine it? She definitely didn't have access to the packaging skills, which all of you are getting, right? Business skills, whether you're coming from business, engineering, the skills that you need to put together a business, an infrastructure that would hold that idea and enable you to grow it into a big organization. She didn't have those. And she didn't have a third thing. She didn't have access to the network at all. She's in rural Ecuador. She doesn't speak English, so how is she going to get access to the kind of capital resources as well as some of the intellectual resources and knowledge that she needs to grow this? Knowledge, networks, capital. That's what now defines what we do in social fusion. So, what is social fusion? It took me from that point, working with Rosalind, then spending many years in international development, working with Rosalind and others on what ended up being projects. This is the second motivation. I had inspiration. These projects started and stopped. Little businesses. They were not going to fail. A lot of money being dumped in there from the international aid agencies. This was not creating real jobs. This was not creating real business growth. They were dependent. Then decided it had something to do with business. So, we talk about making mistakes and serendipity, right? I didn't decide, actually, to step out of international development. I was just feeling frustrated. I felt like this wasn't quite it. I can't stay here, I've got to do something else, it's not quite working. And serendipity stepped in and cut all the funding for some big projects that I was working on. Okay? And at that time, I decided, well, one of my friends was starting a company, actually here, Silicon Valley, said, why don't you come and help us? So I ended up spending 3 years being a non-business consultant, working with them and some others. Spent a year at Solomon Smith Barney, getting more on the capital side, on the finance side. And found that this is a powerful tool. Business to me is an exceptional tool, but it's not the end. So I thought, we need to bring these together. This kind of reach that you can achieve at a Solomon Smith Barney, some of the businesses that they're investing in and growing, and this kind of vision, what Rock's going to have. But there's a huge chasm between them. In my mind, it's like Grand Canyon. Separates the two. But how can I be useful here? Because what's not interesting to me are the businesses that dabble over here, right? Some of CSR, corporate social responsibility, is really good stuff. The problem with it is, it's not baked into the design. So when the economy is good, and you find a lot of corporations and others, it will, invest in the community. What we're talking about is something different. We're talking about investing in the community as a business proposition. But the businesses that are going to be the most sustainable, the businesses that are going to tap into the resources, the human and financial resources that people like Russell and others represent, these businesses are a chemical reaction, right? A fusion. It was just coincidence, by the way, social fusion and fusion here, but a really chemical reaction between the two. So social fusion came out of a desire to find a mechanism to help identify these crazy entrepreneurs. Believe me, definitely not normal people. I don't consider myself normal, and finally got to a point, after all of these years, to say, good thing. Right? These are the folks that are like, no. I don't like it like that model over there. It's not interesting enough. I want to do part of that, put it together. I'm going to test it out. And I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to correct until I come up with something really good. Take the best from the business world, I'm going to take what's really cool from the development side, and I'm going to grow this up. And that sounds exciting, he says to me, and yet it's tough. Now I can tell you. Right? Why is it tough? I want to say a few things about why it's tough and where we're going. I'm going to turn it over to Oliver, and then again we'll have a conversation about this. It's tough because it's exciting because it's new. It's tough because it's new. In all of your courses, right, you have a lot of case studies about best practices in a whole lot of different areas. And now having a little sample of what it means to grow a social enterprise. These hybrid organizations. That sometimes are for-profit, and they're sometimes non-profit, and they're sometimes a combination between the two. And that's exciting. We're not limited by that design. We're really playing with every resource we have. And we structure it like financing looks like, right? Put together something that instead of saying, I'm going to build this because I want to do that, I want to do that. Where? Right? And now we have that structure to get over there. And without those examples, just like Rosalind's challenge, that's your challenge. You end up staying really in this space. It's Melanie's challenge, it's my challenge. It's every single of the social entrepreneurs you'll see come and present to you. The challenge is there are not set and true best practices for how to design it. There are little bits and pieces. Even more challenging, capital, right? There is this big desert out there. That's the reality. Especially if you are an SME, small and medium enterprise, right? You're trying to grow up, right? Especially if you're in an emerging market. Oof. And down in Brazil, you can find a little bit here, maybe some profit capital, and it's happening. It is one of the most exciting emerging areas in social entrepreneurship. Is we are building a new form of business, and we're forming these markets. And what these markets are going to do is connect up two domains that have previously been disconnected. By that I mean, here we have international markets, international business, working really well. One of the most powerful systems we've ever created. Here we have entrepreneurs on the ground, particularly if we're talking in developing countries. Tremendous entrepreneurs. The poor, what we're calling the base of the pyramid. The bulk of the world's population. Right? Extraordinary innovators like Rosalind that are just waiting to have that power unleashed for the themselves, for their country, for us, for everything that we're talking about, business, family, etc. And the image that we're playing with today is of an hourglass, right? So up here, you have business, financial market. Over here, you have the entrepreneur potential, and there's a block in the middle. There's a block because there are not market systems, there are not, you don't have the knowledge. These organizations down here build up that packaging skills you guys are getting, right? Take advantage. To help create some of the most innovative businesses from the market side, business side, both, that will enable good resources to flow between these two domains. Some more points on that. If you're thinking from either a heart perspective, what you care about, or say a head and wallet perspective, in my mind, this domain is the exact same thing. And this is what is, if you don't remember anything else, you'll know this is making lots of mistakes and continuing. There's a second thing. Possibly two things that come out. The second thing is that social entrepreneurs, in my mind, in business as the person you are, it's about practicing business with your head, your heart, all in the same direction. And that's not mine, that's Mo Ibrahim, who just sold a company that I would argue does fall within this domain for $2 billion in Africa to a Kuwaiti company. So what happens when you put your head, heart, and your wallet all in the same direction? Talk about just nice ventures that are kind of touchy-feely. No, we are really talking about a new way to practice business, a new way to develop market systems, and guess what? It is, again, market systems and new ways to practice business that are inclusive of, again, the COPD bulk of the world population. Really important to keep in mind. If you're looking in terms of where you're going in the future, this is not an easy domain to be in. It is absolutely extraordinary domain to be in. And for me, on a personal level, never ever felt so happy, so excited by where I'm engaged. So we have an incubator, that's what Social Fusion is, a greenhouse, to help identify, support, and grow these entrepreneurs in their business. Right? We are dedicated to growing both number, quantity, of new social entrepreneurs, and their impact by ensuring that they reach scale, they get access to the capital that they need, and we're building up infrastructure so they become self-sustaining. I'm going to stop there. Let me turn it over to Oliver, and then we'll have about 15 minutes after he tells you a little bit more he wants to make some accommodation, and then turn it over to you. Now, what's it to me about what Oliver's doing is my initial focus in growing social. I started it as a program within another incubator to really learn from some of the best stuff that was out there. This was an incubator focused on high economy. We had the opportunity to test out some of the methodologies that we've grown with Nokia and Panasonic and the World Bank, figure out what's good out there. Well, let's look at that. Use the word leverage, copy, take that, make it better. And we've been focused on the positive side. The other side, as just suggesting, absolutely essential for looking forward, in this field, is the packaging, growing the whole market. Because right now, with that hourglass again, you were describing earlier, really love, it's a relay race. Okay, work with some of these ventures over here, go and interact with the capital markets, come back, help them build up their confidence, run back and forth. Right? Run back and forth enough so that then you create some conduit that becomes more fluid so that you actually have a real market system in between these two domains that will then become as fluid as artificial capital markets. So we've been very interested in focusing more on this side. We couldn't help it. Unfortunately, we met Oliver and his partner Eloise a few months ago, and they're focused on exactly that, on exactly translating out some of the applications of social enterprises into the market innovation on the structural side that you need to make this whole thing more sustainable. And we've now been spending multiple days and hours how we're going to co-engage on specific projects in Honduras, in India, some other areas. And we've just spent all of today meeting with Google and Video and some others who we're going to partner with to really now take this to scale. And really ensure that we're working with centers like Melody, that we're working with those that can reach multi-country scale, that will be those models that all of you can look at and be like, okay, those are the best practices. Great. Now we've got some of those a little better.
The pace and the experience that Amber has had in social fusion Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is John. It's great to be here. And we're just walking around the campus. I've never been to California. And never seen a big university in Manchester. And I studied, I'm South African. I'm passionate about emerging markets. And I studied in Germany. I'm an anthropologist with my background. And then went over to London and worked on environmental issues, both environmental change and policy. And also to focus on what are the market drivers that enable business to change and provide the solution that we need to solve some of the biggest problems today. I'm going to provide a bit of a sort of top-down view because Amber Nystrom is the bottom-up, actually the top-down is, and it says, initially it says Dow Jones Sustainability Index. It's the fundamental belief that business is there for problems to change. And it's one of the most powerful forces. If you unleash and control right, it actually brings you change. Yes, government is important. Yes, community is important. But business is that where it really happens, and that's passion for me. Now, if you think about where we are now, Stanford University, and you think about what's happening in India, what's happening in South Africa, there are 2 billion people who live on $2 a day. Where I work in Zurich, $2 a day is exactly the amount that a cow gets as subsidies in Europe. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because it doesn't actually allocate the kind of capital, the capacities where it was needed most. What we try to do with the Dow Jones Index is to look at the big environment in which companies operate. Things are changing. You've got the internet, you've got the issues that companies are facing are tremendous, HIV/AIDS, obesity, climate change, all these things are coming towards us and they're big issues. And we have to try and find a mechanism to unleash creative power, innovation within humans, within business, to try and meet those. So in the Dow Jones Index, we screened the top 2,000, the top 2,500 largest companies in the world and asked them, in these very detailed survey, what they were doing to try and meet those challenges. What happened then was the companies that hadn't even thought about this and companies, it's just a large enterprise, like Starbucks, McDonald's, BMW, Siemens. A lot of these companies didn't actually understand how they could look at what these changes are and apply their resources, their strategy, where they really would develop the products and services to provide some of the solutions that they change. So we did that for a couple of years. And then the interesting thing is that financial markets started becoming interested in it. It's not just about financial returns, it's about social returns, it's about environmental returns, it's about understanding the added value that a company is able to bring in the environment in which it operates. So picture this, it's like a glass bowl. There's consumers, there's government, there's people. Everybody's looking at these companies, so they're operating not in an isolated fashion, but fully integrated. This is one of the challenges in the future that we are living in this fully integrated world. Access to information, the internet is critical. So we did this. We've got the financial markets looking at one. Any government investment here. So there's this kind of nexus of non-financial issues and financial issues coming together, creating a very, very exciting space. And for me, when I think back when I started studying, this was exactly when it always happens. There's a friction in it. There's new things happen, and taking those innovation and implementing it on the ground. So we did the Dow Jones Index, which was great, big companies, big lever for change, but we thought, this is great, but what's really happening in the emerging markets? That's where the real challenges are. So what we do at Vantage Point, we're 9 months old, we thought about what can we do to bring more transparency into these emerging markets so that investors and companies and social entrepreneurs working in those countries know what's actually going on in the country. I don't know what's going on in India. I don't know what the real challenges are, but if I can find those challenges and I can use business to address those challenges, that's a very strong value position, if I can unleash that. And so the exciting thing what we're exploring is to actually take an entrepreneur, because this is where it's really at. Just to give you some stats, in Germany, 99% of the employment is actually in the SME sector. It's not in the big companies, it's not the Deutsche Bank and the Siemens. It's actually in the SME sector. So it's a powerful force for change because it is fully embedded in the community. What we're doing now is we're looking at the base in Zurich, we're working with Social Fusion. What we we want to do is to take the right kind of mix of capital, so the money that you can set up your business, but also the network, so really understanding, linking it into universities such as these, tremendous creative forces and positive outlook and passion. Without passion it won't work. We have to sort of say, this is the only way to do it. I'm passionate about bringing that change to the emerging markets, because that's where it happens. I go back to South Africa, I see what's happening there, how people are dying, and if you can get small business and run that business and help that business grow, it's much better and much more powerful, much more direct than getting any big company with whom we can engage, big pharmaceutical companies. It takes 3-4 years for them to even acknowledge that they might have a responsibility for the local environment. So what we're doing now is trying to matching the capital, the finances, but also the tools that you need to actually do that. And find the right projects. And then crucially is to understand the environment in which we operate. Melanie, you had a question in the beginning, like what is sustainability and sustainable development, what does it mean? To be honest, there are so many definitions out there, like what is a social entrepreneur? I think it's not about finding one definition. I think it's more important to understand what it encapsulates and what you're really trying to do, and then to also put it into a social perspective. Because what we think in Europe is sustainable development, great. It's not actually what is needed in Africa. It's not actually what is needed in India. And it's important, I think, also in these studies, to think about the cultural context in which we operate. Very, very important. International development aid money, we're taking something, the IC says, this is how it works, you go to that country and say, bam, try that. It didn't work. We wasted billions. And that's why social entrepreneurship is such an exciting field. I'm very new in this field, but I'm meeting people with passion to really make it work and to actually see concrete results. It's fantastic. That's why we're teaming up. We've got this sort of vision where we want to go with our incubation nodes. And this is we had this discussion yesterday evening. It's more about the path than reaching that end goal. So it's taking one step at a time, checking does it work, adjusting, learning, falling down, getting up again, talking to the right people, having really in-depth discussions, and just moving through that. So I hope that we can, with the Q&A now, just talk about some of the challenge I had also in the landscape that we're operating. And do you have any specific questions on? Yeah.
We'll wait on the specific questions for another 10 minutes. One of the questions, I know Melanie's going to like this one, right? Social entrepreneur. We all throw it around like we know what we're talking about, right? What is a social entrepreneur?
An entrepreneur with a double bottom line.
An entrepreneur with a double bottom line. Meaning, so what was the both of those? So financial, yes.
And sort of positive social outcome.
Okay. One more, yeah.
To go beyond that, someone who, when the two come into conflict, someone who values the social aspect more than the financial aspect.
Ooh, okay. And we have one that's a double bottom line that may be equally valued. We have another that's going to say, I'll be empty. Okay, that in fact, given a choice, they did have to choose, that they would opt for social more than financial. Maybe one more?
But also, it's confused. There's a difference between social entrepreneurship, and social enterprise. And social enterprise is for me the kind of revenue stream or the profit, which you have a double bottom line, or even if they adopt the social. Social entrepreneurship is the United States, and the social entrepreneur doesn't have to have a profit motive, but the growth of scale motive, and the idea to create a model that others could follow, and really just the largest of their idea really creates the entrepreneurship aspect.
What about entrepreneurs? I'm not going to be very unfair here, and I'm going to introduce somebody and ask them to answer this. So, this is a friend and colleague, Sam Moss.
I don't know the answer. I think we're actually a microfinance fund, a $1 million fund that invests in micro entrepreneurs in developing countries. And I think that probably can answer it however you wish. Part of our goal is to look at those people who are generally sole practitioners, have their own business, are borrowing from microfinance institutions, so they have no access to capital other than through loan sharks and others. And microfinance institutions come on board in order to give them credit where they have character and no capital, and they have the desire to be entrepreneurs and are entrepreneurial without the capital. So our goal is to make sure that there's funding there, and part of this is to attract the financial markets, the capital markets, in order to meet what we believe to be an enormous demand over time. That if we're dependent upon philanthropy and philanthropic activity, there is not going to be enough capital to meet the 500 million entrepreneurs who are out there who have no access to capital.
You like the question there. That was very good. Very good. Very interesting, and not by accident. Stan's here also because I think what they're doing is really pushing the envelope in terms of what we mean by social entrepreneur. I want to offer one thing, and this is my question for you. What is a social entrepreneur? Mel and I have been debating about having a debate with some of the main folks in this field, because it's not just about language. This is getting in our way. Right? It's getting in our way if you can't have a consistent understanding of what we mean by a social entrepreneur. So when I talk to an investor, some of them say, social entrepreneur, oh gosh, you need somebody that's kind of soft, and they're going to sacrifice too many of the terms, right? I don't know if I like that, right? And then you go over here on the social side, we talk to some folks, social entrepreneur, capitalism, entrepreneurism, well, that's not really what we're talking about. So there's confusion. So how are we supposed to mainstream this? You know, and I'm going to say, this is, as far as I'm concerned, some people disagree, but this is about mainstreaming it. Otherwise, it is exciting, and that's not interesting. We're talking about changing the world, which we are, and it's got to be mainstream. We got to know what we're talking about. So social entrepreneur, unfortunately, there is not a black and white definition, and there is disagreement. And I think you really touched upon some of the core elements there. So I want to for 3 images, right? So I'm walking the talk, and I don't want to have you think this is social entrepreneur. So 3 images, right? One is from Pamela Harding, head of the Schwab Foundation. I love this one. When she says, what is a social entrepreneur, she puts up 2 pictures. Richard Branson, Mother Teresa. A social entrepreneur, as serious this concept is you bring the 2 of them together. One person. Right? Richard Branson really focused on serious business design, reaching scale. This is exceptionally growth-oriented. Right? Using the best of the best out there. Mother Teresa. Right? Actually, she's a lot more important. So her primary purpose is changing the world, is sustainable social impact. She's also an entrepreneur. She also doesn't give up. It is never enough. We're continuing to grow. We merge these 2 together, and that's a social entrepreneur.
Just 2 things, Amber. Hamlet is number 14 here.
Uh-oh, I might have gotten myself in trouble.
But I also have to say that actually that poster originated from Stanford, you guys. And so she adopted that into her program.
Oh.
There's another really good one out there, if I may. Another great photo to use is a picture of Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire dancing together. And imagine Fred Astaire is the entrepreneur, while Ginger Rogers is the social entrepreneur. You take everything that the entrepreneur is doing, but you do it backwards in heels.
Very cool. Nice. The other one that I mentioned, which is actually the one where I'm really focused, right, is the idea that a social entrepreneur is someone that is actually measuring equally head, heart, and wallet. This is an absolutely integrated business design, so that they are measuring their success based upon criteria that include financial, social, environmental. And the whole purpose of a social entrepreneur is to eliminate this word social in front of entrepreneur, so that good business design means financial, social, environmental benefits, period. So that it's not a trade-off. And I think your point is very important, that the social entrepreneurs that are here, their primary purpose is about social impact. But their commitment is to using effective business design to accomplish that. It's fundamentally about not having a trade-off, about having both.
And if you then think about what kind of capital is out there, as you get to the horizontal line, you've got Richard Branson, everything's about shareholder return, profits. Don't think about the social return, don't think about the environmental return, or any other return. And that's the mainstream market, the mainstream investors. And then over here, we've got Mother Teresa. They've got the traditional, philanthropic organization, who's saying, I'm going to give the money away. It's going to be good. It does good. The challenge now that we face is we want to get these two poles somewhat together. So that what's happening here is with philanthropic donations, in a lot of cases, what happens when those funds dry up? You invest, you support them for 3-4 years, people move on, it's not in vogue anymore, it's not cheap, let's focus on a different area, and then what? There's all that capacity there, but it's not actually integrating the business concept of being sustainable, of being profitable. And I would ask questions that just want to put this out there. Where do you see the difference between non-profit and for-profit? For me, that system doesn't exist. You fundamentally, as a human being, you engage in business activity and you generate profit. If you don't generate profit, then the organization won't survive. And I'm learning the hard way. Like 9 months old, we have to think about where we're going to be in 1 or 2 years' time to be fully financially sustainable. But the crucial thing is what do you do with those profits? And how do you bring these two things together to achieve the kind of change that we want to see in the emerging markets and unleash that kind of business potential and get the mainstream markets in there. What happened with microfinance? Green Bank, 25 years old. We spoke to a small organization in Switzerland 5 years ago about microfinance, Blue Orchard. And you want to talk to the mainstream banks, they ask you after the room. Said, okay, that's not interesting. We're not interested. Now we're 5 years down the line, and Citigroup, Deutsche Bank, all the big guys are starting to happen. And that's fantastic. But it took 25 years, 30 years. We're saying you need tenacity and just focus, and this is possible. And there's from personal experience working in socially responsible investment. We were called crazy, or it was called the Brazil Fund, it was called the national idea at the time. But you wait 10 years, and people start talking about these issues, and that's the going on. So there's a lot of change going on, which we need to tap into.
I'm a cheat now, you want to question but
I didn't answer that question.
well, yeah, it's really good, right? We have social entrepreneurs that are clearly a little bit political as well. That argue Stan is in that group, a social entrepreneur that's coming from a very traditional banking background versus this space. So my question is, so we were talking about this on the way over here. Imagine you have this opportunity, right? So we stumbled into this, went through politics and, my case, politics, international development, business, bringing that together, investment. All the people I know, by the way, all of them. So a lot of the folks that you're going to hear about, including Daniel Hardigan, including Jeff Nelson, co-director of Social Venture Network, including Martin Fisher, the head of Kickstart. We can go down the list of all the names that, the biggest names in here. And without exception, you look at their backgrounds, and they're like this. Because it's about experimentation, right? So, you have this opportunity. Here you are. Right? This didn't exist. I had no idea. People just for 20 years. I didn't even know about the label, quite honestly, until 3 years ago.
I think it's tough.
What would you do? Now place yourself right here. You are Oliver. There's Oliver sitting, right here in the front here. Yeah? And what advice?
I would start with on the personal level. I would ask myself, what am I passionate about? Where do I see the news out there? You walk through town, you see something, you think, oh, this is not right. And then I would sort of think, well, keep that as an idea, combine that with a passion, and then think about what kind of skills you need to try and tackle that. Really practice. So there's not sort of a cookbook. Look, I'm going to take this recipe and this science type of work. So if I would be sitting there, I was thinking, well, and I did anthropology because I thought, fantastic, these systems, I understand these systems, I can science. And then you think, well, this doesn't, I need the tools to enable it. That's why I went to finance. And suddenly you can merge these two, and this is very happy.
Having the tools. What about you, Tim?
How I got to this point?
No, imagine, we're going to imagine, right? Reverse back, and here you are, the same page, and instead of, you went into banking and you did the, number of different things you did, for various reasons. So just briefly, go back in time, and here you have a class on social entrepreneurship, right? Consider microfinance as a component of that. What advice do you have? You guys are entering into the field where we are, and you do something differently than what you did? What's your number one piece of advice for us here?
Well, I think that it's, you'll take the experiences that you're getting now, and try to apply those to test against your own value and constantly look at those. I think there's probably not a better way of doing it, whether you take it as a conventional go into banking, as I did, always having your eyes cast to decide what else is there, how do I apply what I'm learning to something else. In my case, took early retirement and ran into Bob Patillo, a social entrepreneur, who was trying to set up this fund. And it seemed like kind of the perfect thing. It seemed kind of this point where philanthropy and capitalism are intersecting, and each modified the other better. So for capitalism, it gave them a heart, gave it a larger goal, and for philanthropy, it gave it a chance to recycle, put metrics around what is it you're getting, and it seems to make each of those better and attract so many more to each of them than it currently has.
Yeah, what do you guys think? Did you receive a thought? I forgot that other question. Okay. Your question? And then we'll turn over to you guys?
For you?
Yeah.
Where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
Where do I want to be in 5 years' time?
Given where you were 5 years.
Ooh, it's getting more complicated already. Given where I was 5 years ago. So where I was 5 years ago, I was in Spain, working on an international project to design metrics for, I was in Spain doing that and working on some business consulting projects here. So still kind of that schizophrenic area. So where I am now feels the least schizophrenic at all. Because in my mind I've always business as a field and the impact of what I really care about. So where do I want to be in 5 years? Well, I'll answer on both a personal and a professional level because finally they are actually converging. So on a personal level, I want to be at a place where I feel confident that at the end of my day, whether that's tomorrow, 5 years from now, or 50 years from now, that I can look back at my life and feel deeply rested, deeply at peace with how I decided to spend my time. So I'd like to feel that I'm going there. And in 5 years, I'd like to really, really know that. So very rested in that point. So that literally, that next day came and that was it. I'd be okay. That's on a personal level. On a professional level, I want a couple little goals. So on a professional level, I would like us to continue forward in creating some self-sustaining clusters of social enterprise innovation in at least 3 other countries. I say at least, I really think it's substantially greater than that. But in Latin America, India, and Africa, these clusters will, in 5 years from now, creating over the next couple of years, be a year away from being self-sustaining at their base with a sustainable pipeline of entrepreneurs that they are helping grow, incubate, and invest in, so that then those are handed over to traditional capital markets. So we will have created those 3. We will be working with them in 2 capacities. One, we'll have an investment fund where we'll be both building up the business confidence, and we'll be investing directly. And 2, we will have, which we are very close to having now, an unparalleled international network. So that, operating in tandem, and I hope it is absolutely tandem between these 2 organizations, and in each case with a local partner, so that when we find those amazing entrepreneurs, Melanie and others, that you help grow them up, right, extraordinary entrepreneurs, invest in capital, and instantaneously they are connected locally, regionally, internationally. And just an example to make that real, we met recently, Guy Carlos, who's down at the University of Zamorano, came out with a plan that literally eradicates naturally a particular kind of disease that's the #1 killer of tomato plants. Right? Talked to a number of scientists, and it seems to be real. So even in Honduras, he barely speaks English. Savvy guy, but think about that potential. This is real. And we work with the University of Zamorano to help grow him up. What do we want to do? We don't want to just take little incremental steps. And so this is, it's the most real. I want to be able at that point. And right now, we'll piece it together. We'll have a fluid mechanism to say, great, there you are. Here's some investors in the U.S. and in Europe, and here's a distribution network so that you can be tapping into the organic food market here, so that all the producers for Whole Foods will now be working with you so that in fact you can reduce the number of pesticides, you can, et cetera, goes down along this ripple. So that he jumps from being this entrepreneur up to a really viable international business that was owned and grown locally in Honduras and connected up fluidly in so-called developed markets.
One point to add, I think it's just is there's on two organizations, basically two people. So we found over the last 3-4 months of our working together how complementary the skills are, how important networks are, and how important it is actually to learn from each other. And not to be real clever about it, try to reinvent it. It's all out there already. It's just finding the right people, having the right kind of space, and probably in this environment, it's fantastic to have these classes from different cultures, different backgrounds, different interests, to really learn from each other. And I think that's one of the best things we can take out.
Pretty sure we're getting in trouble with Melanie, so we need to stop and turn it over to questions from all of you.
So here's something I'm really struggling with. When you talk about the Dow Jones 2500, I'd say your results were exactly what I would have predicted, in that shareholders demand profitability, Wall Street demands a stock price, and nobody cares about a $5 million or $10 million or $5,000 market. And I'm really struggling with, so how do you get from these tons of very small opportunities? What makes you think you're going to change the top 2,500 revenue-producing companies that they really don't care about a couple $1 million opportunity?
Give you a really concrete example. GlaxoSmithKline, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, they produce their drugs, they sell their drugs in our markets here. They also produce antiviral drugs, which would be fantastic to eradicate HIV in South Africa, in Africa. Now, Glaxo in the beginning said, now we've invested a lot in this product, R&D costs, we have to try to recoup our costs, it's not our responsibility. The thing is, the world is shrinking, it's just becoming the same. Glaxo can't hide. And there are markets, some markets in terms of profit maximization, but as Glaxo as a company is now actively engaging with social entrepreneurs on the ground, healthcare companies, administering, bringing what they're really good at to those markets. So, and we can have a ton of.
So I mean, it's about the political pressure and the ability to be a good marketer to go after these things as opposed to the rest.
I'm actually sitting here because we've got pretty limited time, so I'm actually going to ask you to say what I know, and we'll be here afterwards. And I want to make one comment on that, right? We were just at a VOP, this is Stu Hart, that his thinking actually preceded the Stockline. And this is, this is Pfizer, and we'll just go down the list of who's who in the multinational corporations. They're all in this. Why? Because they recognize that that bulk of the population has no idea how to access this, not just selling to. Because a lot of these folks, they need to be generating sustainable income. A lot of the other markets are saturated, and as the head of Pfizer said, we're good at being a steamroller. We're a really big company. We're good at steamrolling over whole new markets. What we're not good about is navigating, these areas where you need totally different skills. So they are very interested in this, and there was a metaphor that a doctor there offered that I think is the perfect metaphor. That is, in the body, you have a really large molecule and can't pass through a membrane. Think of that membrane as its base of a pyramid, right? They don't do that well. It latches onto a smaller molecule that actually knows how to navigate, right? And that's actually the physiological reality. Those are the multinational corporations and the SMEs that get this ground level.
Just one comment on that same WRI conference. The head of agriculture at the time listened to a presentation by an SME and realized that they were far ahead of DuPont in developing agricultural development. And as he came up to speak, he said, I want to let you know, and this is the audience of 1,000 people, I just called the chairman of DuPont, and I told him we're behind. So I think that there's that idea that creativity actually takes place at the margins. And the big organizations have a way of not getting to the margins very well. And I think there's this recognition that it's coming here on the side.
Yeah. No, please do. Great example.
Just have a quick comment to that and a question for you, Amber. Also, it's not just leading to the user, it's building your viable supply chain, which often is small and So my question to you is more specific to organizations. You can go through a little bit how it's organized, meaning you're based here, but you have offices abroad, identify these entrepreneurs and hunters in there, whatnot, you send a consultant for a couple months, you build an on-the-ground team, and you just walk around and do
The structure of social union.
And this, you feel the structure is viable.
Yeah. Well, gosh, it better be, or I better stop and change it, right? I'll do it briefly, and then anyone that wants, have a much more, much more detailed presentations about what our organization is about, and what the finance model and all that kind of stuff. So that's a two-way. So briefly, we are a social enterprise, social fusion. We're set up as a not-for-profit, but we are income generating. About 40% self-sustaining now. Estimate is, I think there's a conservative estimate within 2 years, we'll be fully self-sustaining at our base. We get our revenue both from clients, so the companies that we work with, social enterprises, as well as from mission-specific consulting. It is only directed in two areas. One, extending out this incubation model, right, to grow our mission. Our mission is in growing the number and the impact of social entrepreneurs. So we're very much about extending out this capacity to enable others to also grow up this impact by using this model and methodology that we've developed. And the second area we do mission-related consulting is on capital development. So we're working with some funds that are really building up that infrastructure because right now, no matter how good we are at helping grow social entrepreneurs, if you walk up and, there's a cliff there, right? You've got to build out that whole market. How we're set up, the base is in San Francisco. It's the only office, and we don't intend to, at any point in the near future, have another office that is a social fusion. We now have one of the main things that's interested in is a partner, a very substantial partner in Europe, and our model is a triangulation model to work between U.S., Europe, and a partner in an emerging market who is owning and growing this incubation. So our goal with them is a term that we made up in Brazil, partner child. This is a combination between a partnership and a franchise. And that means that we are not saying, like McDonald's, we have it all worked out, we're going to come in and slap, there we are in Honduras. That's not the point. The point is to go in and say, we have some, I think it's better to get into this in this presentation, we have a whole set of tools, business diagnostic and growth tools for enterprises, a coaching and mentoring network where we really leverage, right now we have 50, that's about to go up many levels. These one-time CEOs that volunteer their time to work with these companies. They have a whole series of ecosystems we've built out. And so both how you structure this ecosystem and then the technology tools and the methodology, the training behind it, that's what we offer to other incubators, for those that will become an incubator, both existing and new. And so in Colorado, as a very specific example, we'll be working with them to build out this methodology and structure and figure out what needs to be tweaked to have there on the ground, and that'll be much more intensive, relationship to continue with a relationship over the next several years to ensure that they do reach a point of self-sustainability, and that our role then is to move out of that center role and move out into connecting them through continued access to the networks and resources here in the U.S. and Europe, right? Because it is about empowerment. And our goal, our exit strategy, within 10 years, in line with Millennium Development Goals, we should have made ourselves obsolete as a direct service organization.
She just wants to sit in Honduras and sit at the end of that.
So, that's a brief answer to that. So in terms of also our business model, it's a hub and spoke model. So in terms of full-time folks, there are only 3 of us, right? 3 full-time folks in social media, which I think is a sustainable model. Now, at the same time as I say that, let me be really clear. We also have 5 investors that are on our advisory board and boards that spend a great deal of time vetting companies and reviewing them. I'd love to do this. They'll do this actually without getting paid, right? Because it is exciting for them way back, through using their head as well. We also have that network I mentioned. We have 50 coaches and mentors training us, and they work with our ventures. Right? We're working on a partnership with 2 organizations where that would jump up hugely, many thousands. If we can do design, knowledge, and training to help this relationship work better, so we can partner up with coaches and mentors here in the U.S., Europe, locally, in Alabama. So it is about leveraging resources, right? So that your base model is very efficient. So you don't have a huge number of people. Scale can be used in different ways. So we're interested in scaling impact. We're not interested in becoming a huge organization ourselves. The end vision is a network of these clusters, innovation engines, that are themselves locally owned and grown, and if we connect them up to capital markets and to some of the other networks internationally. And yes, we do have a group of folks that are the consultants that, as we're continuing to expand, are really past that inflection point, national expansion now. We waited, a lot of requests for us waited until now we've got the right partners, so that we do have others that as that increases, yes, they'll be the folks who go on the ground, et cetera, so that our interactions can be briefer and we can continue focusing on expanding in new areas.
Network is a great word. We use it all the time. It's pretty sexy out there, along with partnership and whatever else. Can you talk to me specifically, sort of logistically, and just about what it means to actually do? What does a network look like to you? And how do you most effectively engage people and keep people engaged?
Great.
Right, that's what I'm trying to figure out here.
Yeah. No, really good. I think probably all of us can talk to that. I'm actually going to go speak at the University of Cambridge on exactly that. What is a network, right? The network is, in my mind, a series of connections. Right? Some of those are weaker, some of those are stronger. That is fundamentally what a network is. And you can get networks in business systems. So how do we create and maintain a network? You made several points there. So it's how you're building it up. What are the mechanisms that you're using, both as you're building it and then to continue expanding it and increasing that depth? And how are you making it sustainable, like long term?
And also,
yeah.
how do you measure success?
Okay, so how do you measure your success? So we can walk through that. So and I'll just use, myself and social media as an example, because I definitely come to believe that it is our most powerful resource and very focused on it. And it's not a light thing about Twitter, except that it is fundamental to creating the kind of change that we want to create. So how did we build this up? I did this very consciously. And my first thing was, okay, here's this thing called social entrepreneurism. I don't know what this is. I'm new to this, come from this background. So who's doing what? So did some research out there on what's out there that are doing the best stuff. Right? And let me just identify a few of them, not all of them, a few of them that seem to be doing the best stuff, and go and talk to each one of them and ask them that exact same question. Who's doing the most interesting stuff? Who are the leaders in this space? Who are the people that are really the change makers? Right? And the organizations that I was interested in were, if you think about the birds flying up in the sky, they always fly to sea. Why? It's really hard flying over a long way. And there's that nut out in front. It's like breaking path and making it easier for everyone else. So if you really want to know about a new domain, you can work with 100 of them, or you could pick the 3 that have a whole V behind them. So that first did. Identify who are the change makers. And it was pretty clear. It's a relatively small space. So there's Ashoka, the Social Venture Network, there's Schwab. Identify really about 5, and then talk with them about who the other folks were. And said, it seems to me like you guys are in this space where there's scarce resources, there's incredible opportunity, and there'd be a lot to be said for connecting up a little bit more what you're doing. Are you interested in that? Yes. And then figure out, okay, so now that we've identified, that was the first in terms of the how, right, to identify some of these organizations. And within those, these are the organizations that also generate some of the individuals and the companies. You're extending out their network from partner organizations, individuals, companies, because who do we want in our network? We want those change makers, we want leaders and philanthropists, and we also want really compelling social entrepreneurs. So it said, what would be useful and interesting to you? What are you missing in terms of your connection that we might be able to offer, right, to make it more powerful? And one of the clear responses was, here in the Bay Area, let's just take that as an example, there is not really a nexus point, a fusion point between these organizations, right? So it's convenient. So do use of it, move on from them. This was the first part. The second how was to create some programs, right? And one of ours is Conversations in Social Enterprise. Pretty simple program. We did the first year for 2 months for 2 different sessions. Really popular response. And now we've done it, last year it was 6 sessions. This year it was 6 months in a row. It's the 3rd or 4th Friday of the month, and bring together some of the best in the field. So you have a consistent physical area where these folks come together and engage on what's the most innovative out here in terms of enterprises, right? You create a space that's useful to them. That was really important. What's useful to them? Well, for entrepreneurs, access to capital, right? But on the capital side, boy, they want to know about the innovation without being inundated. so face-to-face. So continued experimenting with what's working. So did create that space, and then created another couple mechanisms for how you engage the individuals in these networks as coaching and mentoring. It's a way for people to get engaged through a limited commitment. Right? So for this commitment, though, because most people are really busy, right? So it's great. 3 months, that's all I'm going to ask. 4 hours a month. And you can test it, sample it. Stick your toe in, right? See if it's a work with one of these measures. I haven't had a single one that then stopped after 3 months. It had a taste. So these are some examples within this network. You're identifying who are some of the change makers. You are creating a consistent nexus point where each one of the people that are coming to that play are benefiting, including you. We're very clear about what the benefits are for us. It's marketing, it's pipeline, and it's creating impact. Right? And it's consistent. Then you're creating other mechanisms to, again, make it easy for new folks to come in there. And then there's another piece, and these are some of the components. We could go on and on about this. So I'll stop. There's another important piece, which is if your organization or you as an individual, that's a big part of what you want to do, and you need that network where you have to become self-generating. So it's not just dependent on my work and somebody else working with you, going out and identifying this, building up the related to programs, right? You want it to become self-generating. So we will explicitly say to those that are in this, great, leave it in, go out and tell others, about this, and that they can come in. And by the way, if you're interested, I'll connect you up, and now we're doing a project for us for how we are really solidifying this network on a much bigger level, actually codifying that network.